Welcome to the Attack the Rack podcast. I am your host, Curt Van Hecken, and you are tuning in to the number one rated podcast on the planet, based on the people that rated it number one. The Attack the Rack podcast is brought to you by Get to 2 Media. We're talking all NFL today. We're going to look back at those amazing games last weekend. We're going to look ahead at this weekend's games. We're going to be joined also by Peter Hunsberger, just as soon as my producer Dale can get him all lined up. He was at the Jaguars Chargers game. We're also going to talk a little bit about what's going on with Lamar Jackson, and we're going to look back and see how I did with my NFL preseason picks. The sponsor of the program today has been a sponsor before in the past. It is the YouTube channel called Chillaxation Sounds. Phenomenal for when you need an extra little help falling asleep. There's sounds for rain, thunder, coffee brewing, windy snowstorm. If you need help falling asleep tonight, go to the YouTube channel Chillaxation Sounds for that extra boost you need. All right, and I will post a link to the Chillaxation Sounds YouTube channel in the description for this episode of the Attack the Rack podcast. All right, so first of all, I do know it's Friday today, and the show usually comes out Mondays, but I didn't want this coming weekend's NFL playoff games to happen without talking about last weekend's games. And I also wanted to take a quick look at the upcoming games as well. So as I said, we will be bringing back in Peter Hunsberger shortly to talk about this past weekend's amazing playoff games, including the Jags Chargers game that he was actually at. Before we get into all that, though, I should have done this already, but better late than never. Let's see how I did with my NFL preseason predictions. I predicted the standings of every division and the records of every team. So the Attack the Rack podcast you're listening to is just part of the Attack the Rack YouTube channel. I post shorter segments, and I also am consistently posting shorts. I posted my preseason picks in a series of shorts back in, late August, early September, something like that. I am not encouraging you to go back and look at them. I can admit the quality of those shorts was pretty poor, but I do encourage you to take a look at the rest of my shorts. YouTube shorts are similar to TikTok videos, and most of my shorts I think will give you a nice little chuckle. Anyway, let's start with the NFC, and we will move left to right across the U.S. map, starting with the NFC West. All right, so I predicted in the NFC West, I predicted the Rams to win the division with an 11-6 record. Unfortunately, they finished third with a 5-12 record. Granted, a lot of that was due to the fact that Matthew Stafford got hurt, so I'm not going to beat myself up over that too much. I predicted the 49ers to finish second at 10-7. They actually won the division. They finished 13-4. I predicted Arizona to go 9-8. They finished 4-13. Probably a lot of that had to do with Kyler Murray's injury, although he is proving to not be that good of a quarterback. So who knows if they would have been able to get above 500 as I predicted, even if he would have played all the games. And then, I did predict Seattle to finish last at 3-14. They, with the surprise play of Geno Smith, actually finished 9-8 and finished second in the division and did make the playoffs. Moving along to the NFC North, I predicted the Vikings to win with a 14-3 record. They did win the division with a 13-4 record. I predicted the Packers to finish second at 11-6. They ended up finishing 8-9, finishing third in the division, and did not make the playoffs. Finishing third, according to my prediction, was the Detroit Lions. I predicted them to finish at 10-7. They finished at 9-8. Definitely ended the season on a high note, which we will touch on here in a little bit. And then I predicted the Bears to finish last, which I was correct on. However, I did give them a little bit more credit. I thought they were going to win 5 games this year. They only won 3. And then in the NFC South, I predicted the Bucs to win the division. I was correct on that one. I did actually predict them to finish 9-8, though. They did finish at 8-9. I predicted the Panthers to finish second at 7-10. I was spot on with their record. They finished 7-10. The Falcons I predicted to finish third at 6-11. They finished 7-10, pretty close there. The Saints I did not give much credit at all to this season. I predicted them to only win 2 games, and they actually did win 7. I think quite a surprise this year was the NFC East, where every team finished 500 or better. Definitely not in line with what I predicted. I did predict the Cowboys to finish first with a record of 10-7. They did finish second with a record of 12-5. And then I did not give anybody else in that division much credit. I predicted the Eagles to go 5-12, but was dead wrong there. They went 14-3. And then third place, I predicted the Giants to finish 4-13. They actually did go 9-7-1 and actually made the playoffs. And then the Commanders finished fourth at 8-8-1. So overall in the NFC, I did predict 3 of the 4 division champs. And based on my standings, 5 of the 7 playoff teams, 5 of the 7 teams in the playoffs, I would have gotten correct. All right, and now let's move on to the AFC, again going left to right across your United States map, starting in the AFC West, the division that was supposed to be loaded this year. A couple teams were pretty disappointing. I was correct in picking the Kansas City Chiefs to win the division. In fact, I predicted the record spot on at 14-3. I did predict the Raiders to finish second at 12-5. They finished a very disappointing 6-11. I was pretty close to the record with the Chargers. I predicted them to go 11-6. They finished 10-7. I predicted them to finish third. Obviously, they finished second. And then the Broncos, really big disappointment. I thought, even though I predicted them to finish at 7-10, I thought they were a pretty solid team this year. You know, the reason I predicted them to have 10 losses is because, you know, they had to play the Chiefs, Raiders, and Chargers twice each. They did finish at 5-12. Russell Wilson, huge disappointment in his first year as a Broncos quarterback. NFC North, guys, I was spot on. I predicted the Bengals to finish first, the Ravens second, the Steelers third, and the Browns fourth, and that is exactly how it finished. Record-wise, I predicted the Bengals to go 13-4. They finished 12-4 because of the one less game with the Bills. The Ravens, I predicted them to finish 12-5. They finished 10-7. Could probably argue maybe if Lamar would have played a few more games, they might have won another game or two. Steelers, I was spot on at 9-8. Mike Tomlin, head coach of the Steelers, still has never had a losing season. That is quite remarkable. And then the Browns finished at 7-10. I had them at 4-13. AFC South, not good for me here. I predicted the Colts to win the division at 12-5. They actually finished at 4-12-1. Titans I predicted to finish second at 9-8. They were 7-10. Jaguars 9-8 finish. Fun team to watch. Great story this year. Again, we got Peter Hunsberger joining the program here shortly. He was at the Jaguars' incredible comeback victory against the Chargers. He's going to talk to us about that. I predicted them to go 2-15, and then the Texans I predicted to finish last at 1-16, and they finished 3-13-1. And then wrapping up with the AFC East, I predicted the Bills to finish 14-3. They went 13-3 again. Didn't finish one game. Very well could have predicted that spot on. I predicted the Patriots to go 6-11 and finish second. They finished 8-9. The Dolphins actually finished second at 9-8 and made the playoffs. I predicted them third place at 4-13. And then the Jets, who started out the season as a really nice surprise, ended up finishing 7-10, finishing in last place, which I did predict. However, I only predicted them to win 2 games. So also in the AFC, I did predict 3 of the 4 division winners, and according to my predictions, I did get 5 of the 7 playoff teams. So there was a few surprises this season. Definitely the play of the New York Jets, as I mentioned in the beginning of the season. I think the New York Giants were a pleasant surprise. And the Jaguars, wow. But none were a bigger surprise than the play of the Detroit Lions, at least in the second half of the season. So they started out the season 1-6. They finished winning 8 of their last 10 games. 3 of their losses were to the Bills, the Seahawks, and the Eagles. And they played them all close. 3-point losses to those 3 teams. Obviously, the Eagles and the Bills, a lot of people are predicting to make it to the Super Bowl. So they played both of those teams really tough. They should have beaten the Minnesota Vikings twice. They lost in week 3, 28-24, but then in week 14, they beat them 34-23. The Lions actually played 9 games this season against playoff teams. They finished 3-6, but 5 of their 6 losses to playoff teams were by 4 points or less. Offensively, the Lions finished 4th in overall yards per game. They finished 8th in passing yards per game, 11th in rush yards per game, and 5th in points per game. However, defensively, they were not very good. They finished last in yards per game, giving up 30th in passing yards given up per game, 29th in rush yards given up per game, and then 28th in points given up. So certainly offensively, they seem to be on the right track. Need a lot of help defensively. Hopefully that'll be addressed with the upcoming NFL draft. Also in that second half of the season, when the Lions went on that nice run, Jared Goff looked like an MVP. And he went his last 9 games without an interception. He went 10 of his last 11 without an interception. And in those 11 games, he threw for 18 touchdowns. So his last 11 games of the season, that's well over half the season, he threw for 18 touchdowns and just 1 interception. He finished the season 6th in passing yards, 5th in touchdown passes, 5th in quarterback rating, and 7th in passer rating. What's that, Dale? Okay. All right. So, hey, folks, my producer, Dale, is letting us know we are all set with Mr. Peter Hunsberger. I'm going to take a quick break, and then I will Yeah, I'll be back with Mr. Peter Hunsberger. And we are back. All right, Peter Hunsberger, welcome back to the program. So good to have you. You are now officially a recurring guest, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, let's do it again, man. Let's run it back again here.
Yeah. I will say it's not quite as cool as the Jaguars Chargers game you were at last Saturday night.
There's different ways of describing the coolness. It was 40 degrees and one of the biggest comebacks in NFL playoff history. So quite
amazing,
quite an experience.
Yeah, so we are very excited to hear all about that. We'll get into that in just a minute here, but first, one thing that I wanted to touch on here is what is going on with Lamar Jackson. Let's rewind a little bit to, I guess you could say, after last season during the summer. It's been a hot topic ever since. Obviously, he's in the midst of needing a new contract. Decided to go without an agent. Is that correct?
I believe that is still the case, yes.
Okay, so that he still doesn't have an agent. What do you think the thought process is behind that?
It's a good question. There's not a lot of players that negotiate for themselves on behalf of themselves. I think Nuke Hopkins did, and there's been some other, a few other examples. I feel like when you're negotiating your rookie deal, maybe it makes more sense because there's just not a ton to negotiate with the restrictions of the rookie deals. But, I guess to him, either he wants to be the one negotiating, right? So maybe he just feels like he's the best advocate for himself, or maybe he thinks the agent fee of the 3% whatever is not worth it. I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know if he's been asked or if he's shared why, but he's not the only one. But it does seem a little bit rare. And I don't know, for a 3%, he basically has to be confident that he can do better than whatever, that 97% of what the agent would be able to do.
Right. And I guess I would find that hard to believe, being that these agents, it's what they do. It's their profession. They do it all the time. I would think an agent would be able to, get more money to make that 3% worth it. So he was he looking for, was it 250 million is kind of the number thrown out before the season started?
Not sure. I think that's okay. What I think you had shared, and I'm not quite sure what his number of years he was looking for. But, yeah, I think to your point earlier, I think the other reason it feels like for having an agent involved to me is kind of an intermediary, so that you're not creating any bad blood or awkwardness with your employer. I mean, they want to pay as little as possible, right? You want to make as much as possible. There's obviously a disconnect there. And I just feel like having an agent helps keep the relationship more even-keeled too. And I don't know, it feels like for me, you can start to introduce some weirdness or bad blood or, I don't know, just the whole aura around being the direct negotiator could be a problem. But yeah, I mean, I think obviously he wants to get paid, and everyone's going to have ideas and thoughts about his current injury and everything else. I think it's probably best to assume he is injured and not just holding out. But I also think look, if you're waiting to get your big deal and you're hurt, you're definitely not going to want to risk that, right? You can respect that.
Right, for sure. And I guess I maybe spoke too quick about that number, 250 million. Regardless of what the number is, I'm sure it is, whatever the number is, what he's looking for is to be the highest paid player. I would assume. And, I think going into the season, I think he maybe could have gotten that, or it was maybe more justified. Unfortunately, he didn't have the greatest season. He was injured again. I can't imagine that helps his case.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, Deshaun Watson's deal probably was one that a lot of owners didn't like to see because it set the bar. I mean, you saw how poorly Deshaun Watson played when he came back. Didn't seem to match his value. I think, in some of the advanced metrics, it seems like, Lamar is still, measuring out pretty well, even though the season might not have appeared to be as strong. I think the arguments he'd make too, he has an offensive coordinator who I think now has been let go. I think Roman's gone now. His number one receiver was hurt this year. Dobbins had some injury concerns. So I think he probably has a case for, such limited surrounding support. And then you also see kind of what the replacement quarterback value is with Huntley and Brown. And so maybe he feels like he has a better case now, but to your point, it'll be tricky, in the midst of coming off this injury and how the season ended with him not going to the game.
Yeah.
There's questions, right? I don't know if you saw today, Harbaugh had a quote, basically saying, 100% Lamar is going to keep playing there, but then he kind of ended it with crossing my fingers. And so I think he was saying all the right things, but also admitting that, he's not the final ultimate decision maker. So I don't know. There's a lot of unknowns here. It'll be interesting.
Yeah. And then, another thing too is he's only played, 12 games the last 2 years. That's something that, maybe could affect the number too. But, the other thing is, like, I feel like he needs some help. If the Ravens want to win a Super Bowl, which is the ultimate goal, he's going to need some help. And if they're going to spend, 200 plus million on Lamar Jackson, where's the money to get the help needed?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, at that point, I don't know what their cap situation is, but let's just assume that, any deal with Lamar creates some tightness in the cap.
Yeah.
They're going to have to get creative and, look to the draft, et cetera. But, that is a problem. I think they got to get a new offensive coordinator in, obviously,
right,
but they need to surround him with more weapons. And this seems to be the challenge with the whole transition from rookie QB deal to big deal. I mean, certain quarterbacks like Mahomes, you can sort of surround him with whatever wide receivers you want, and he's probably going to make it successful. But I don't know. I'm not quite convinced yet. I mean, I think Lamar probably wants to have a more traditional passing offense, maybe, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. The jury still seems like it's out on whether he'll be able to execute in the way the top elite quarterbacks do.
Yeah, sure. All right. Well, hey, let's move on to, what a great, opening weekend of playoff games we had. I guess one of the more least competitive games, let's start with, was the Niners and the Seahawks. Niners won 41-23. Where do you think the Niners fall now? Are they looking like a favorite?
Yeah, it's a team that I continue to look at and feel like the strength of, top to bottom, and just some of the talent they have on offense, picking up C-Mac this year. It's hard to find weaknesses, and obviously the coaching is so strong. Yeah. Defense has been legit. I think there's definitely some weaknesses in the defense. I think, one of the things going to the Seattle game was, they can be beat over the top. And I think Metcalf had a 50-yard touchdown. I can't remember if that was through the air 50 yards or whether it was a shorter pass, but either way, I think, there's been some teams like the Raiders showed you can score in San Fran. So I always feel like any defense can be beatable, but in general, their defense is really good. And, with Debo, and I think Ayuk's been an underrated guy this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Purdy. I think, this past weekend I saw someone with a Purdy jersey, so definitely has arrived. But it feels like they're the team to beat in the NFC. I think the Eagles have kind of stumbled a little bit towards the end of the year, and it feels like the Niners are going to be a tough out in the NFC.
Yeah, and then the Giants over the Vikings, 31-24. What do you think? Vikings' last shot at making it to a Super Bowl this year? Or you think they can still make it back?
I think they still got some young. Obviously they've got Jefferson. They're going to have to, lock him up and pay him some big money. I think the biggest question they just have is, all right, everyone knows they outperformed their expectations this year, and they got lucky, right? I mean, if you look at kind of coming into this game, I think a lot of people were saying that was the easy pick, was the Vikings to lose in round one, because they won a bunch of close games, but overall didn't rate very high. And I think the Kirk Cousins question is a big one. He statistically was pretty good this year, and he was generally solid. But I mean, if you're looking at a Monday night game, a Sunday night game, a playoff game, it's just hard to look at Kirk Cousins and get excited or think he can be the one to lead you. Now, one thing I will say is good to remember that this is year one for their coach, and sometimes these things take a little bit of time. And look at year one for Russell Wilson with a new coach, new scheme. So I don't know, but I think they'll be good. They're not going to just kind of revert, and I don't think this is the end of an era per se, but I do just wonder whether they want to look at a quarterback to start grooming and put a little pressure on Cousins.
Yeah, and we do know there's a team in that division that is creeping on a come up for sure, coming for that top spot. So
the roar was restored this year, and it's going to be loud this year, boys and girls.
All right, and then Bills and Dolphins was a close one. Bills only won by 3, 34-31. Should Bills fans be concerned?
I think so. I mean, obviously it's a little bit of a fluky score, just because in general that Dolphins offense didn't do much. I mean, there's a lot of turnovers, et cetera, but that's been a problem for Buffalo. Josh Allen making bad turnovers, and I do feel like Buffalo's defense, you can attack their defense. I don't think they're quite what they've been in the past. They've had some injuries, et cetera. So I think Bills fans should be concerned. I don't see them winning by 2 touchdowns. They're gonna stay in games, but I don't feel like they're dominating on either side of the ball. And I think for Buffalo fans, you're definitely not real confident going into this next game that you're going to come away with a W.
All right, and then how about Bengals fans? Should they be concerned? They didn't play terrible, but my gosh, they only beat the Ravens 24-17. Ravens playing with a backup quarterback.
Yeah, that one's one where I don't know. Sometimes I wonder whether these matchups within division are just a little unique. And I guess maybe you could argue that for the Bills, although the Bills have had, going back even the Lions on Thanksgiving, they've had some of these games where it's just been a little sloppy. So that's a little more of a pattern. But, Bengals Ravens was always set up to be a little bit ugly. And, the Ravens had about as good of a chance as you could have hoped for, right? I mean, Huntley actually looked pretty good. And obviously that one big play, I mean, maybe chalk it up to Harbaugh. And I think there's some arguments too that they've schemed and they've drafted and they've really focused on trying to stop Joe Burrow with their defense. knowing he's the biggest concern in that division. And so I think some are arguing that was always going to be a hard game, but I think Burrow right now, the confidence that he has heading into this next round, I think I see the Bengals as a favorite over the Bills at this point.
Okay. All right. And then one of the craziest things we saw this weekend, and probably one of the craziest things we saw all season long, Brett Maher, 4 missed extra points. It didn't affect anything. The Cowboys dominated the Bucs, but wow.
Yeah, that was something else. I was out on a date with my wife and missed the first little bit of that game and came back. I think it was second quarter or third quarter, and I'm getting some texts from buddies like, referencing Ray Finkel, Ventura. And I saw, I think, his third and fourth, at least his fourth miss, maybe not his third miss. And it was just going to dump onto the crazy thing about Maher is that Maher has been pretty good this year. He's been hitting. I feel like he even had a 60-yarder or two this year. So he's been really good. I always look at those moments and just think, how does this not happen more? I mean, I'm kind of a head case when it comes to some of that stuff. I put myself in his shoes and I'm like, oh, once I miss one, I'm going to question whether I'm going to hit the next one. Yeah. It is a reminder, like, for me at least, how mentally strong these players have to be, especially kickers, right? Like, you're coming in so rarely and you have a really important role. Like, you have the most direct way to add points. Like, every play you're involved with as a place kicker, other than the kickoffs, is like you're adding points. Even with kickoffs, you can argue you can definitely add points the other way if you kick it out of bounds, or you can add expected points the other way. So it's to me, it's always shocking it doesn't happen more, but I think they were all happy he hit that last his last kick to set things a little more at ease.
And I will say, in a game that was not very competitive, one thing that kept me tuning in was to see if this streak of missed extra points was going to continue. I did see the Cowboys did sign a kicker to their practice squad, but it doesn't sound like, really there's anything to that. They're certainly sticking with Maher. So Buccaneers, not good. What do you think? What are we thinking Brady's going to do now?
Well, no, I definitely listened to a few folks this week kind of talk through stuff. I mean, I'm sure you saw the news. Leftwich is fired, which is pretty crazy. You go from hot coaching commodity, potential coaching head coach option for teams last year before, and now he's kicked to the curb. And it's interesting, you think about the Ravens and the Bucks, and there was another. I'm trying to think of the other one. Did the Chargers fire Lombardi?
I haven't heard yet, but
okay. So it feels like the scapegoats for some of these losses seem to fall on some coordinators, and none of the coaches seem to bear the brunt of that. But the Bucks for me is interesting situation. I would be hard pressed to see Brady coming back, and I think he's got some options. I think one of the more intriguing options would be the Raiders. Reconnecting with McDaniels. You got Devontae Adams there. Obviously Josh Jacobs had an incredible year. Waller. You got these really strong skill position guys, but then there's some arguments. Maybe he wants to stay on the East Coast. I think his wife and kids are this direction. I don't see a ton of other teams where it's like ready made for him to hop in and have a chance to win everything. Maybe Miami or something, but
Miami.
you get, or maybe the Jets. Those are a few other teams, but now you're talking with in the Patriots division. Mm-hmm. The Jets makes a little more sense, but they're still pretty raw, right? I mean, I think everyone agrees they got talent and a lot of young rookie kind of talent this year, but I don't know if they're ready for a Super Bowl run next year, which is kind of what I'm guessing what Brady wants, but I'll be the first to admit I have no idea when he's going to hang it up. Like, he might try to play till he's 50. I have no clue.
Yeah, it's very unique. I mean, the guy's got what, $300 million waiting for him as soon as he wants to, I don't know if it's in the booth or if it's in the studio doing, analysis, but this guy has just got to be addicted to the game, addicted to competition. From an outsider's standpoint, at his age, all the success he's had, it's really kind of odd that he just wants to keep playing, but he must literally be addicted to the game.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has a different level of competitiveness and the such. I mean, I think he's what, like, I think he's about 8,000 yards ahead of Breeze, who's number 2 on the list for all-time passing yards, and he's broken records. So he holds some records, and some people are arguing, well, with 17-game season, maybe moving to 18 at some point, records are going to start to become a little maybe easier to break.
Right.
Some people are arguing he's so competitive that he wants to keep playing just to distance himself so he can hold those records, next 30, 40 years. But it's pretty insane to think at 45 that he can go out on the field and compete at the level he is. I mean, it's insane.
It is. All right, now let's get to the game of the weekend, a game that you actually were at. Jacksonville defeats the San Diego Superchargers 31-30. They were down in the first half. Was it 27-0?
Yep, in the second quarter.
In the second quarter, what was the atmosphere like when they're down 27-0 in the first half in the stadium?
Definitely got quiet. I remember, so our mutual friend Mike Binko, who works with the Jags, we had made our way back into this club zone. It's a little indoor area with a patio where you can watch the game, kind of 50-yard line-ish. And we were getting a drink, and they were showing the game inside on the screen. And the Chargers had the ball. We're driving, and so we're just like, all right, let's get warm and get a drink and go back out there in a minute. And it's just the deflating atmosphere of like watching the Chargers score again. And each of the picks was just like so deflating, I think, for the crowd. And 4 picks in 1 half. It definitely felt like one of these, all right, good season, good run. We've met our end of our season. I couldn't tell if people were leaving at halftime, because it's always kind of everyone's kind of moving around at halftime. And I think by the end of the game, it felt like there weren't a ton of people that had left. But
okay, that was another question.
It just got so quiet,
Yeah, we talk about one of the craziest things of the weekend being Mars' 4 missed extra points, but Trevor Lawrence's 4 first half interceptions, that's crazy too. In fact, I don't know what he ended the half with, but when he threw that 4th pick, at that point in the game, he had 4 interceptions and only 4 completions.
Yeah. And, the first one was so brutal because it was like a double tip in their own zone, right when the game started, right? Kind of spotting them 7 points. The second one is a weird 4th and 7 play that, looking back, kind of like, man, I know Peterson likes to go for it and whatever, but, definitely looked like interference or holding or something on that play. But then, he was kind of forcing it in the other ones, and it just felt like the Chargers were daring the Jags to kind of do something a little different, and they were playing such tight coverage. And all you could think about was, can we get into halftime with at least a score to eat away at this? And then you reset, right? You adjust. And I think the thing that I keep thinking back to was 27-0. Right before they went to 27-0, I think it was 24-0. The Chargers had a chance to put a touchdown in. Ended up not, kicked a short field goal. I think that was off that fumble on the punt. And so, the Jags got the ball, and, at that point, getting a touchdown before halftime was just like essential. And so that drive, that touchdown, going in down 3 scores becomes like, all right, it's not insurmountable. And I think that definitely kept the crowd just a little bit engaged. I mean, people were still doubting the comeback, but definitely, I think the biggest thing for me looking back was the only positive about some of those interceptions is, you create a short field, so at least the time is not running down. Like, once the Chargers are up 27-0, they just want time to be, a rolling clock basically. And one of the problems of getting up too big too early is with all that time left, there still is a chance for the Jags. And so the Chargers were playing the clock at that point. And someone could argue didn't play the clock very well, but when you get down that big that early, at least you got some clock to play with.
Right. And yeah, like you said, that getting a score before the half was pretty important. At what point though did you really start to feel that momentum building?
Trying to think back here. I think at the point when they missed the field goal, that's the turning point for me, where I said, okay, now we've got momentum, and now they just made a kind of critical error, and so that just kind of doubles down. And it's funny when you watch the guys on the sideline, you can't tell what they're saying, what they're feeling. In my head, after the 4th interception, first half, in my head, I'm looking down there thinking, these guys got to be just not even talking to Lawrence, like they're so annoyed and pissed off. Rewatching some of the behind the scenes stuff, and everyone's staying positive down there. So kudos to them, and just a reminder that it's a psychological game in many ways. But yeah, after that missed field goal, it just felt like, man, this is definitely in reach.
Okay.
And I mean, it still felt like everything had to happen just right.
Right.
But it was amazing. I always think back to like the Lions back in the early 90s. They had a game where they were down, I think 20 or something with like 7 minutes, something like that.
Was that at Minnesota?
Might have been. Yeah. I don't know why my brain just always goes back like 7 minutes, 20 points.
Yeah.
So like it's always a good reminder of like, it's possible, right? Like there's a possibility out there. And yeah, so to be down 20 at halftime was like, very overcomable. And, Chargers are going to Charger. So, you've got a team on the other side that's very likely going to fumble something up.
All right. And then let's fast forward to that field goal at the end of the game. What was the atmosphere like? I guess kind of as you're sitting there waiting for that ball to be snapped, and then when it went through.
It was interesting. So we got there. I got to the stadium around 5 o'clock-ish for the 8:15 game. And kind of walking around, and walked out into the stadium and watched a few guys warm up. So Evan Ingram, that guy is out, from what Mike says, like every game. He's the first one out there. He was doing workouts out there. But you see the kickers are just spending a ton of time, which is always funny, right? They play for a matter of seconds during the game, or minutes.
Yeah.
But they're spending a lot of time warming up. And then even during the game, they're practicing kicks and kind of staying warm. So I think for me, I was just kind of like, was watching Riley Patterson before the game, and during the game, kind of, even when they're down 27, he's over there practicing. It's like they have to have this mentality. So it was interesting to see at the end of the game, like, this isn't just some kicker sitting on the bench. Like, I've kind of watched him, be moving for the last 6-7 hours. But it's just this moment of like, when it's a field goal that's so makeable, you're just hoping, you can't even look. What's crazy is watching it from the side, from the 50-yard line, you can't tell whether it's in or not. You just have to see the crowd reaction. And so it goes in, crowd reacts, and so we're going crazy. It wasn't until later I realized that, like, that thing barely hooked it.
It was close. It was close.
Yeah. So I think some folks are saying if it was 5 yards back, that hook would have happened and it would have missed, So
I can believe that.
I don't know. It's just such a funny game because it's like he gets the game ball, he's the hero, but like a few yards right and he's the GOAT,
Yeah.
So
all right, let's transition now to this weekend's games, and we'll continue talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars. They got a tough one this weekend. They're at the Chiefs. Chiefs are a 9-point favorite.
Yeah, obviously I'm going to be rooting hard for the Jags after last week. See that run continue. I don't think it's out of the question the Jags could pull something off here. I mean, I feel like when they played in the regular season at Arrowhead, it was kind of before they went on a little bit of a run, but I think they played them well, and I think the Chiefs are a team that, they don't have quite the repertoire this year. I mean, look at their receivers, and it's not a team that scares me, right, in terms of skill position guys, other than Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, Kelsey's, best tight end in the league, but I think the Jags could make it close. It's hard to imagine them winning on the road against Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. I don't think it's going to happen. So I'm going to go Chiefs here.
All right, and then we kind of got another kind of heavy favorite. Your hometown, not your necessarily your team, your Lions fan, but your hometown Philadelphia Eagles. They're a 7.5-point favorite at home against the Giants.
Again, one of these like divisional matchups, teams know each other well. Daboll's done such a good job this year with the Giants. Like, they have no business being where they are, but pretty cool to see what he's done with Daniel Jones, etc. I think this game, in theory, could remain close because of some of those factors. Just the divisional games typically just get a little wonky, but I think the Giants' run ends here. I think the Eagles will prevail and move on to the NFC Championship.
All right, and what really could be a fantastic game, the Bengals are at the Bills. Bills are a 5.5-point favorite.
Yeah, the line sort of perplexes me because, like, just seeing how the Bills have played the last few months, and obviously the Bengals-Bills game a few weeks ago, football became sort of irrelevant. But after Damar Hamlin got hurt, and had went through such a traumatic experience and everything. But before that unfortunate incident occurred, I thought the Bengals looked like they were going to win that game. Just the swagger and the way they were moving the ball just felt like they had something clicking. So I'm going to go Bengals here.
All right. And what could be another pretty good game, Cowboys at 49ers, 4-point favorite.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, a week ago, we probably wouldn't have been talking about the Cowboys as a chance to upset the Niners. I feel like I'm close on this one because I do feel like the way the Cowboys played, like when Dak is on, I feel like the Cowboys can hang with anybody. But he is a little bit hot cold, and it's just hard to imagine the Niners at this point losing. I think it's close, and I think, look, if Dak plays like he did last week, I think they could beat the Niners because they're a team that has the talent. But I just think their defense has a few too many injuries, and I think the Niners are going to prevail here.
All right, Peter. Well, hey, before we let you go, I want to get some predictions for you. First of all, who do you think is going to win the AFC?
I'm going to go Bengals.
Okay. And then who do you think is going to win the NFC?
I am going to go Niners.
All right. So we are looking at a Bengals-Niners Super Bowl, taking me back to the 1980s. Boomer Esiason and Joe Montana. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Pretty cool. And then who do you think ultimately is going to win that contest?
I'm going to go Bungles. I think Burrow right now is I don't know, having gone through it last year and everything, I think they're a little bit seasoned, and Burrow just has that swagger about him. The only thing I'll say is some injuries on the Bengals side, offensive line. Like, there are some risks in terms of the Bengals playing to their full potential, right? If they're able to protect Burrow, that's a big issue. But I'm going Bungles in a little bit of a revenge from that Boomer Esiason era.
All right, Pete. Well, hey, thank you for joining us again on the program. We'll look forward to having you back again. And I'm calling it a day as well. Thanks for listening to the Attack the Rack podcast. We'll see you on the next one.